One day, the world came to an end. The pandemic covered the planet like a heavy blanket. People stayed at home, the streets were empty, social networks were filled with news about the sick, and masks became a must-have on the street. The war began suddenly. Explosions woke the city in the middle of the night, and very soon the news feeds were full of reports of losses. The economic crisis followed, and then, quite naturally, hunger appeared. Store shelves were empty, people learned to survive on minimal supplies. But it was not humanity that hammered the final nail into the coffin. Fantasy-like creatures appeared and the world was finally plunged into chaos. What happened after their appearance is quite easy to predict. Just like in the novels, superhumans appeared who had awakened incredible abilities. However, there was one thing that distinguished reality from the fantasy world. The superhumans were not strong enough to stop the apocalypse. The hero reaches out, using his fingertips to pull out some chips from the package. The world has not yet gone to pieces, although it is already close to it. That's why he now lives more or less normally. But there is also something that oppresses this guy. He is completely alone, and there is no one around. Now, he is the only one living in this 100-square-meter apartment. His mother, father, grandfather, and grandmother are all somewhere outside. The boy's father bought the place with a loan of 200 million won, and about the same amount was taken from the family's general budget. The reason the young man started living there is because before the family can get a tax refund on the purchase of this apartment, someone has to live in it for 2 years. The guy looks at the glowing screen of his phone with frustration. He found himself trapped here right after the apocalypse began, without any communication. Once again, a notification about the absence of a network flashes on the smartphone screen. The guy sighs in frustration, getting ready to put the now useless gadget aside. But suddenly his attention is drawn to some noise outside the window. He suddenly throws his head up and sees a huge monster flying straight towards his window. The monster flies right up to the glass and opens its huge mouth wide, revealing dozens of sharp fangs. Frightened, the young man helplessly covers his face with his hands, mentally already saying goodbye to life. The monster roars loudly, and the air flow from this scream causes the window glass to rattle dangerously. The guy screams again in fear, his voice hoarse from horror and panic. But a few seconds pass, and for some reason the monster does not break the window and does not fly into the apartment. The guy hesitantly opens his eyes and sees a notification in the game window, which says that this monster has been denied entry. The hero exhales deeply, finally remembering that no one can enter his apartment without permission. He is slightly bent over, breathing loudly and trying to calm his racing heart. The guy is still alive only thanks to this system. Once again, he approaches the front door and pulls the handle, not losing hope of leaving the apartment. But again, nothing happens, and angry, the young man kicks the ill-fated door with all his might. No matter how hard he tries, getting out of here seems almost impossible. Finally, the guy kicks the door one more time and returns back to the room. This is already the 3rd day since the world met its end. And thanks to this system, he is still alive, but locked in his own apartment with no way to escape. Absolute recluse can't leave the house. A new notification pops up, and the guy clenches his teeth in anger and helplessness. He is incredibly angry that he can do absolutely nothing in this situation. Besides, the more time passes, the more problems he has. The food that was in the apartment was almost gone. And yesterday, the electricity was cut off, which is why the refrigerator stopped working. The guy survived only on the supplies from it, but they would not last long. He only had a few packages of instant noodles left. The young man is distracted from his sad thoughts by a new notification. The system reports that the owner has killed a level 23 Calican, for which he receives a large amount of experience and increases his skill level. Not understanding what is happening, the guy approaches the window again. He looks out into the street and sees several goblins devouring the body of the very monster that crashed into his window. The young man begins to think that he got the points for the kill because the monster died from hitting his house. The system notifies you that a new skill has been acquired and that nearby loot meets the requirements. The stunned guy reads that the prey calculation begins, and at the same second the monsters raise their heads and stare at him. The monsters look at him angrily with a loud growl, and the young man cannot understand what is happening. He is again informed that the counting of the loot has been completed, and more than 2 million won have entered the wallet of the absolute recluse. Suddenly, the light that was previously turned off comes on. The guy realizes that, for reasons unknown to him, the electricity has returned. The system suggests that half of the house's functions will be restored in order to preserve the dignity of the owner. The house declaration reaches the 3rd level. A joyful smile appears on his face and the guy can't hold it back. Finally coming out of his stupor, he rushes to the refrigerator. The guy opens the door and sees that the equipment is now working too. He rushes to the water tap and turns the valve, making sure that there is now water in the apartment too. Still hesitant, he quickly runs to the stove, presses the power button, and the panel obediently lights up. The recluse still cannot believe his good fortune, although he does not fully understand how it happened. But now, everything in the house works the same way as before the end of the world. The guy reaches for the phone with hope, but to his disappointment, there is still no network, and the gadget remains useless. The recluse clutches his head in frustration. He looks around, and another thing comes into his field of vision. Among the papers and other trash on the floor lies a small flash drive. Without thinking twice, the guy picks it up and sits down at the computer. This flash drive contains photographs of himself and his parents, starting from his childhood. With tears in his eyes, the boy looks at his little self, tightly holding the hand of one of his parents. In the next photo, he is already a few years older, but still looks just as happy. The last photo was taken very recently, on his last birthday. The recluse frowns in disappointment and closes the folder with photographs. He exhales heavily through his teeth, holding back unwanted tears. The young man decides to bring his family here, no matter what the cost. With these thoughts, he resolutely gets up from his chair. The guy doesn't yet know what exactly he'll do, but he intends to make every possible effort. Suddenly, he hears the notification sound again. The system shows him the first-level store, where he can now create lists and purchase the goods he needs for a certain price. He thinks for a second, but still decides to see what kind of items are in this store. Therefore, the recluse stretches his hand forward and touches the desired icon with his finger. Since this store shows how much money there is, it means it is definitely connected to the wallet that the system was talking about earlier. After pressing the store, the guy hopefully goes to the window again. But even though his skill level has increased a little, he still can't leave this house. However, he knows one thing for sure. If he hunts monsters, he will be able to increase his level even more and get a couple of new skills, and so on, until he knocks out the skill that will allow him to get out. But how to destroy these monsters is still unclear. There is virtually no chance that the situation with the monster crashing into the window will happen again. The boy looks down thoughtfully, watching as the goblins continue to tear the body of the dead monster into pieces. He can definitely kill them. The recluse grabs a bottle of water and returns to the window again. With a good swing, he throws the bottle down. Hope returns to the boy's heart when he realizes that he is able to throw objects outside the apartment. So he immediately decides to take advantage of this opportunity and bends down to get a small dumbbell. With a joyful smile, he squeezes her hand tightly, finally feeling like he can do something. But the happy smile quickly disappears from his face when he looks back out at the street. Several more goblins approach the goblins standing below and, gesticulating wildly, call them somewhere. Having grabbed the rest of the prey, the monsters are about to leave. "Don't go!" the guy shouts to the monsters, but they, of course, don't hear him. Then he takes a deep breath and swings. With all his might, the guy throws a dumbbell straight after the retreating monsters. And unexpectedly, even for himself, his projectile hits the target, smashing the head of one of the goblins. Now the guy is sure that he is finished. All he had left was another dumbbell exactly the same. The guy doesn't think there's anything else in the house that can kill even one goblin. He simply doesn't have the physical strength to throw a TV or a computer. Meanwhile, the goblins, realizing what happened, begin to scream loudly. Quite quickly, the monsters realize where exactly this dumbbell came from and raise their heads up. The guy understands that now he has definitely been noticed. The goblins talk loudly in their own language, keeping their eyes on the man in the window. As if on command, all the monsters suddenly jump up and run straight towards the house from where the dumbbell came. The recluse is scared at first, but eventually comes to the conclusion that it is not so bad. At such a close distance, it will be much easier to hit the monsters with something. The guy stretches his hand forward, presses the desired icon, and opens the store. The system window shows him the cash balance again and offers to open the list of goods. The recluse decides to take advantage of this offer and clicks on the icon, still holding the dumbbell in his hands. "Would you like to add this item to the list?" the system asks. The guy agrees, and the system starts scanning the dumbbell. Now the classic 3-kilogram dumbbell with non-slip coating has been added to the list. The recluse sees that it costs exactly the same as in the regular online store where it was purchased. With interest, he presses the buy button and waits. A second later, exactly the same dumbbell as his materializes next to him. "It works!" the joyful guy cries out. Now he has a chance to carry out his plans. Without thinking twice, the guy throws the dumbbell he just bought out of the window. And again, the projectile hits the target right on target, slicing open the head of one of the approaching goblins. The recluse killed a level 7 goblin and received experience, and 3,345 won for it. The goblins meanwhile run up to their fallen comrade, but they can no longer help him. Immediately after the first dumbbell, the second one is already flying in their direction. The third monsters are no longer going to wait and are scattering in all directions. Damn, the guy swears. He has already bought 3 sets of classic non-slip 3-kilogram dumbbells and intends to use them all. The recluse grabs one of them and swings again, hoping to throw it further this time. He succeeds, and the projectile hits one of the goblins right in the face. After this hit, the skill level increases again and a new skill appears. This time it's an alternate dimension used to store items. The guy decides to use it right away. To test the new skill, he places one of the dumbbells inside, and then he takes it back out, happy that it all really works. The summoned dumbbell materializes right in his hand. Now the recluse can summon items from the vault to any place he needs. A bloodthirsty smile slowly spreads across his face. "Open the vault," the guy commands. He stretches his hand forward again and concentrates. "Summon the dumbbell." "Summon the dumbbell." The recluse's voice echoes through the room, repeating the phrase over and over. Now, several dumbbells materialize in the air right above the goblins crowded there. Such speed leaves the monsters no chance of escape. Once the goblins were dealt with, the recluse decided to add a few more important items to the vault. In total, there were about 10 items, including all kinds of food products and everyday necessities. After some time, the guy noticed that several were missing from his wallet. He begins to wonder where this money could have gone. Electricity, gas, and water bills immediately come to mind. Therefore, the recluse decides that the money was written off specifically to pay all these bills. This means that the money will go away much faster than he expected. After the recluse hunted the goblins, they immediately fled and abandoned their former home. Since then, he has only managed to kill a couple of monsters. The guy looks out the window, hoping to see at least one lost monster, but only the head of the very first calican is lying on the ground. So, we'll have to look for another way. The recluse looks up, hoping that sooner or later some stupid calican might fly past. The guy's eyes immediately widen in surprise. He can't believe his own luck. There really is a huge monster rushing straight towards him. The recluse cries out and mentally thanks all the gods. With lightning speed, he turns around and runs deeper into the room. There he finds a small mirror and a ladder. Having tied the mirror to a stepladder, he drags part of it out onto the street. The guy's calculation turns out to be correct, and the sun is reflected in a bright glare in the small mirror. Noticing this bright glow, the monster turns its head towards the light. The monster immediately notices a man in one of the windows. With a loud growl, the calican turns around and flies not past, but straight towards the recluse. Now the young man can only wait. It worked. He rejoices, calmly standing in place and waiting for the monster to approach. Meanwhile, the monster had already flown up to the window and opened its huge mouth wide, showing impressively sharp fangs. The recluse thinks that at this rate, he will soon gain the necessary experience and skills. If he manages to kill this creature, then it is very likely that the level will rise significantly. The monster still continues to hover in front of the window, flapping its huge wings widely. The air from these swings practically knocks the guy off his feet. He covers himself with his hands, trying to see at least something with his teary eyes. The recluse expected the monster to crash into the window and die, but something went completely wrong. He looks outside and sees a whole and unharmed calican clinging to the wall of the house with its claws. The monster looks calmly straight at him, opening its mouth wide again, from which saliva begins to drip. A small bead of sweat trickles down the recluse's temple from the tension. Meanwhile, the monster impatiently knocks on the glass with its huge beak, trying to break it. The sounds of the blows are deafening and make the boy's heart beat faster from fear. The system warns that an unauthorized entity is attempting to enter. The recluse hopes that the monster will not succeed in doing this. He needs to try to do something, so the guy opens a store. From what he had observed so far, loot counting only occurred if the corpse of a defeated monster was somewhere nearby. The goblin hunt was not successful for this very reason. Some survivors took the corpses of their fallen brothers with them when they left, and they were not counted as loot. In other words, if the distance exceeds a certain limit, loot is not counted. The recluse cannot allow the same thing to happen to this calican. This monster needs to be killed with one blow, and the guy suddenly realizes how it can be done. He buys 10 bottles of canola oil at once from the store. Before the monster flies away, the guy quickly grabs them and runs to the stove. There he takes out a saucepan and places it on the hob. Without wasting precious seconds, he immediately begins to pour the purchased oil into it. Having poured everything out, he turns on the stove. Then the guy assembles something resembling a torch from improvised means and dips the resulting object into hot oil. Immediately after this, he hurriedly asks the system to open the store. and pours the remaining oil from the pan straight into it. Having finished, the recluse finds a lighter and takes it into his hands. With a slight grin, he lights a fire and holds it to the makeshift torch. The torch lights up instantly, and the young man has to move it aside a little to avoid getting burned. He returns to the window and, luckily for him, the monster is still there. The young man carefully watches the movements of the Calican, choosing the right moment. "Call of canola oil," he finally cries. A system window immediately appears above the monster, who did not expect such meanness, from which hot oil is poured onto him. The monster growls in pain as the recluse watches, waiting for the oil to cover most of its body. And when this happens, he leans out of the window as far as he can and swings the torch. Luckily for him, the recluse manages to hit the monster right away. The fire engulfs the body of the loudly roaring Calican in a matter of seconds. It worked. The guy is happy. The monster, meanwhile, is already losing consciousness from pain and heat. Almost immediately, the monster falls down like a heavy stone. The recluse stands motionless at the window, watching his flight. Calican screams loudly with the last of his strength, but he can no longer escape the scorching fire. Time seems to drag on forever, but eventually the monster's eyes finally go out and it dies. The loot count begins. After the calculation, almost 10 million won was deposited into the recluse's account. Before the guy even has time to be surprised by such a huge sum, the house, by order of the system, suddenly begins to expand. The recluse cries out in surprise, looking around in panic. Something strange begins to happen around him, and the young man cannot understand what it is. He freezes in place, unable to move. Suddenly, his body is twisted in an attack of unusual and incomprehensible pain. It seems that the entire space around has been plunged into darkness. And in the midst of this darkness, the guy suddenly begins to see some kind of corridor. He mentally walks through these doors and sees a family sitting at a small coffee table. People? The guy thinks, dumbfounded. He thinks that these are neighbors from the apartment nearby. The guy clutches his head in another attack of pain. The people he now sees in front of him for some reason look confused and frightened. The recluse cannot understand why he is observing them now. Gradually, the darkness begins to dissipate. The guy tries to collect his thoughts and get rid of the slight dizziness. The system shows him one of those people, Choi Hyun-jun, whose age has already crossed the 30-year mark. Next to him, he sees Park Hae-won, the man's wife. Their first child is 6-year-old Choi Na-young. And the last thing he sees is the family's 3-year-old daughter, Choi So-yeon. The system notifies that creatures have been discovered that meet the requirements for citizenship status and offers to grant them citizenship. If this is not done, all these people will be driven out of the house. This means that they will all become easy targets for monsters. So the guy decides to grant citizenship to these people. Most likely, he will now also be able to acquire new skills related to citizenship. And the first skill is Absolute Eyes, thanks to which nothing in this house will be hidden from the owner's gaze. The young man decides to see what else might be related to citizenship. He sees that only 4 positions out of 600 are occupied by citizens, and this number greatly surprises the guy. He can look at the characteristics of each of his citizens. The recluse understands that with the help of these people, he can become even stronger. Going even deeper, the guy sees that he can even give some kind of quest to his citizens. At his own discretion, he can assign both a reward and a punishment, including death. At first, the guy decides to assign the citizens to kill the goblins, but then cancels the request. He understands that if he wants, he can kill his citizens at any time. Now it's in his power. But what to do next is still not very clear. Out of curiosity, the recluse decides to try using the Absolute Eyes skill. And as soon as he clicks on the right icon, everything around him changes. "I see everything," the shocked guy whispers quietly. Moreover, he not only sees but also hears everything that happens in his house. He watches as a quarrel between the spouses escalates. This family has run out of water, and Hyun-jun wants to go and get some, but his wife is categorically against it. Hyun-jun planned to go to the nearest store, because it was quite large and there should definitely be water there. Hae-won doesn't want to let her husband go on such a dangerous expedition. But the children are asking for water with tears in their eyes, and she has no choice. The husband begins to persuade her even more strongly, and promises that he will definitely return and bring something. "You trust me, don't you?" he asks, his voice pleading. Hae-won realizes that her children will die of hunger and thirst if she doesn't let her husband go to the store. The recluse commands the system to dispel the Absolute Eyes skill. The situation is much worse than he thought. The guy thinks it would be nice if more items could be added to the store. To his delight, he finds a menu where he can upgrade the store, storage, and dignity preservation. The recluse decides not to delay and immediately spend the points he earned earlier on improvement. The shop skill level is now 2. The number of items in the list has been increased to 20, and a 10% discount has been applied to the prices of all items. There are still 2 points left, and the recluse decides to invest them again in the store and in preserving his dignity. The store can now hold up to 40 items, and there is a feature that can restore old items and turn them into new ones. So, upgrading the store level was definitely worth it. The guy opens the store again, but this time to buy water and tangerines. If he provides his neighbors with electricity and water, he can ask for a lot in return. The guy increases the level of the skill Preservation of Dignity, and now he can register vassals. Meanwhile, Hyunjun is already heading towards the door, a backpack on his shoulders and a golf club clutched tightly in his hand. Haewon hugs her children and looks sadly after her husband, hoping that everything will end well and he will return back to them. The man leans over to the children and asks them to protect the house until he himself returns. The girls look at their father with tears in their eyes, not wanting to let him go. The father tells them that they must definitely go get water and food, and gently ruffles their hair in an attempt to calm them down. But there are monsters outside. One of the daughters finally breaks into loud cries. She remembers very well how it all happened that day when they were playing calmly on the playground. Horrible monsters appeared out of nowhere and ran straight towards them. The frightened girls jumped up from their seats and tried to run away from them. They ran as fast as they could, trying not to look back. Then, they were lucky that their parents were nearby and immediately picked them up in their arms. If it weren't for mom and dad, it's unlikely that the girls would have managed to escape from the terrible monsters. Hyunjun frowns as those memories come back to him as well. Both girls are already crying hysterically, and no matter how much their mother tries to calm them down, all her efforts are useless. Hyunjun sadly thinks that this may be the last time he sees his family. But there is no choice, and one of them must go in search of food. Suddenly, the door handle starts moving as if someone is pulling it from the other side. The whole family turns to the door at the same moment, freezing in horror. Hyunjun grips the handle of the stick tighter in his hands, ready to protect his family to the last. "Excuse me, open the door, please," suddenly comes from behind the door. Hyunjun is relieved to realize that it is the voice of a human and not a monster. However, this could also be some kind of monster that can talk like a human. That's why the man remains silent, frantically trying to decide what to do. Meanwhile, there is silence behind the door. "He's gone?" Hyunjun whispers quietly under his breath. The man approaches the door cautiously to listen if there is any movement behind it. But suddenly the door swings open and the room is filled with bright light. Hyunjun immediately rushes towards the family, covering them with his body. The man screams loudly in panic, begging them not to touch his family. But his scream suddenly dies down when he hears a human voice behind him again. He looks around and sees a young guy who doesn't look like a monster at all. "Who are you?" the man asks, his voice trembling from the fear he has experienced. The recluse replies that his name is Kim Jae-hyun, and he lives next door. The guy continues that he has water and tangerines with him, and suggests talking after the whole family has eaten. Hyunjun turns to the guy, not believing his ears. Haewon continues to hug the children, afraid to trust a stranger so quickly. The head of the family bows politely to Jae-hyun, thinking to himself that perhaps this man could really help them. "Please come in," he says politely, giving way. They walk up to the table and both girls look at Jae-hyun with expressions of utter horror. The recluse thinks to himself that he seems to have frightened them too much. He looks around and notices curtains that block out light, which is very smart. This really reduces the chance of monster attacks. The first thing Jae-hyun decides to do is turn on the light. He lifts his head up and his eyes light up bright blue. The family looks around in surprise. Jae-hyun hands Hyunjun a bottle of water and asks him to give the kids a drink before they continue. The man immediately gives each of the girls a whole bottle. The thirsty children empty the bottles in a matter of seconds. So Yeon drinks so quickly and greedily that she ends up choking and coughing. Jae-hyun looks at her a little surprised, his eyes clearly showing pity for these little frightened girls. He hands So-yeon a tangerine, smiling warmly. With apprehension, the girl still accepts the gift. Haewon, knowing that she can't handle it herself, takes the tangerine from the girl to peel it. The girl manages to do this in less than a minute and hands her daughter the first slice. The woman puts a tangerine slice into So-yeon's mouth as she looks at her with anticipation. It seems that over the past few days of the apocalypse, the child has already managed to forget even the taste of fruit. Having eaten a slice of tangerine, the girl smiles happily, pressing her palms to her cheeks. "Is it tasty?" Mom asks with a warm smile, and the child nods vigorously. Next in line is Na-yeon, fidgeting impatiently next to her sister. The girl also gets her slice of tangerine and breaks into a happy smile. The recluse is presented with numerous notifications about the increased trust these citizens have in him. The system suggests that Na-yeon has met all the requirements to be registered as a vassal, but unfortunately, she is still too small. Unlike ordinary citizens, Jae-hyun can only register 10 vassals. They should be at least at Hyun-jun's level and be able to follow orders. But the trust of this particular man is still too small to become a vassal. Jae-hyun's thoughts are interrupted by Hyun-jun, who wants to at least thank the kind stranger. The man doesn't know how he could repay such kindness. The recluse invites him to come out and talk about it. Hyun-jun is a little tense, but still agrees, and they go out into the corridor. Before he starts talking, Jae-hyun is silent for a few seconds, and the awkwardness is practically in the air. Finally, he asks if Hyun-jun and his family have received citizenship. The man replies that yes, they all saw such a notification window about half an hour ago. After receiving it, the whole family couldn't even move for some time. From these words, the recluse understands that all these people were frozen until he agreed to register them. Jae-hyun makes a decision. He will help this family return to the life they had before the apocalypse. Hyun-jun, hearing this, asks again in shock. The recluse promises him that he can make it so that monsters cannot invade their home. It just seems impossible. But Jae-hyun is confident in his words. Hyun-jun immediately realizes that it is not free and asks what he will need to do. The recluse warns the man that he may lose his life if he agrees. Hyun-jun decides that he would have to go for water and food anyway, which is also very dangerous. He put his life on the line when he was about to go get water for the girls. Suddenly, Jae-hyun asks the man how much his golf club cost. The man is surprised by the unexpected question, but still names the amount. It becomes clear to the recluse that this is too expensive to add to the list. Hyun-jun tries to find out why this question was asked, but the guy just waves it off. "Do you remember the day the monsters appeared?" he asks again. The confused man replies that it happened over the weekend. Their appearance was truly terrifying. Jae-hyun thinks that those people who stayed at home probably managed to survive. One goblin doesn't have too much power. Its level is even lower than that of the average adult male. The real strength of these freaks is that they move in groups, but the same can be said about people. Jae-hyun decides that he needs to raise his own army. That's why he needs Mr. Choi. The recluse invites him to search for survivors with him. After talking a little more, they go back to their apartments, and very soon darkness falls over the city. Hyun-jun's trust has grown significantly since their first meeting. Jae-hyun hopes that he will eventually be able to meet his family if he continues to slowly accept people and move forward. A loud scream interrupts his thoughts. Jumping out of bed, the young man rushes to the window. He looks down and can't believe what he sees. Before his eyes, several people fearlessly engage in battle with the goblins. Jae-hyun is upset that it will be difficult for him to help them. These goblins look very angry and hungry. Their mouths are wide open and caustic saliva drips from their sharp fangs. But it seems that people are not at all afraid of this, and they decisively rush into the attack. The recluse watches this battle with interest, trying not to miss a single detail, and therefore immediately notices something strange. One of the people deals the goblin just one blow, from which the monster suddenly flies back several meters. "What the hell?" Jae-hyun screams. Another girl suddenly takes out a bow, and every arrow fired from it reaches its target. These arrows never miss, hitting the angry monsters right in the head every time. Another man stands calmly on the ground, holding a baton over his shoulder. Suddenly, he jumps high into the air and lands on the shocked goblins. His club smashes the monster's head almost to smithereens in just one blow. Finally realizing their situation, the goblins scatter and run away from the danger. People remain in their places, and it seems that there is not a scratch on any of them. Suddenly, the girl with the bow listens to something and again gets into a fighting stance. In a second, the weapon is ready for combat again. But she immediately understands that there is no danger, and the sound she heard was the sound of an object falling from some window. Realizing this, she turns towards the house and immediately notices something strange on the highest floor. Jae-hyun waves his hand at her with all his might. The girl looks up in surprise, squinting slightly to make out the strange man. Meanwhile, the recluse is waving both hands at once, using all his strength to do so. And at this time, Hyun-jun comes to him. The slightly tense man is holding some kind of box in his hands. Jae-hyun opens the door for him and asks him to come inside. Hyun-jun blushes awkwardly and politely thanks. He tries to enter the apartment, but suddenly he is stopped by a previously invisible barrier. The man freezes in surprise, not understanding what strange thing he has stumbled upon. The system suggests that unqualified people cannot enter the house. The recluse looks closely at the unexpected obstacle. Could it be that no one will ever be able to enter his apartment? Or only those registered as vassals can enter? Hyun-jun decides to just hand the box over to the guy straight away. He put everything there that could be used as a weapon. The recluse looks into this box and is quite satisfied with what he sees. He asks the system to provide him with 5 bottles of water and the same number of packs of ramen. A stunned Hyun-jun watches as food and water materialize out of thin air in front of him. The recluse asks him to go and put the box with all this at the entrance to the first floor. Hyun-jun fears that it might be too dangerous. Jae-hyun reassures him, because through observation he had long ago realized that goblins are only active during the day. And now he needs to somehow attract those people outside to his side. They will have no choice but to come to him when they realize there is food here. So he once again insistently asks Hyun-jun to take this box. He is confident that it is completely safe. Hyun-jun is still a little hesitant, but still agrees to help. He bows politely and gets ready to leave. "Thank you." Jae-hyun smiles gratefully at him. He must definitely do something for such a good person. So the guy quickly creates a task in the system, after completing which Hyun-jun will receive a little experience. He explains to the surprised man that it is something like leveling up in the game, and for each level raised he will be given a reward. This gives Hyun-jun a little more strength and motivation. He heads towards the stairs but still feels a little tense, afraid of meeting one of the monsters. Trying to step as quietly as possible, he slowly descends the stairs. Finally, the man goes outside and down onto the porch. He just needs to leave this box here and go. Just in case, the man covers himself with a stick to feel at least a little calmer. In the darkness not far from him, he suddenly notices several vague silhouettes. Images of goblins about to devour him immediately begin to appear in the man's head. "We need to run!" he panics, and he almost starts to run away when suddenly he trips over something under his feet. With a loud cry, he falls and hits the ground. The man tries to force himself to move, but his body does not obey at all, and he remains lying in place. Behind him, he already hears someone's footsteps. Already preparing for the worst, he covers his face with his hands in horror. But suddenly he hears human voices. "Are you okay?" one of the strangers asks him. After some time, Jae-hyun receives a notification that an unauthorized entity is trying to enter the house. He immediately begins to worry about Hyun-jun, whom he himself sent out into the street. To dispel doubts and find out who is breaking into his door, the recluse again uses the absolute eyes skill. Each time it becomes easier for him to use this ability. Almost immediately, the guy sees Hyun-jun and those same people from the street walking with him. They are just discussing that their rations are running low and new food would be very welcome. The recluse dispels the skill and regains normal vision. The system immediately offers him to register these people as his citizens. In the process of expanding his territory, he could forcibly grant citizenship to those who were there. But for some reason, outsiders were given a choice. This means that if they want, they can easily reject his offer. "What should I do?" Jae-hyun thinks in a panic. And then suddenly a small TV on the wall picks up some signal and starts making a sound similar to a telephone ringing. Jae-hyun doesn't immediately understand what it is. He takes the call and Hyun-jun appears on the screen. His voice sounds too quiet, and the recluse increases the volume by a few notches. The system, meanwhile, offers to edit the task, and the guy immediately agrees. This is his chance to turn things to his advantage. So he edits the quest, and now Hyun-jun needs to treat the new guests to ramen. Hyun-jun sees the updated mission and seems to like it. Jae-hyun asks the man to give the strangers food first, and he promises to do everything in the best possible way. With a polite smile, the man conveys the recluse's words to them, and the people agree. A delighted Hyun-jun returns back to the system window and informs the guy of their agreement. As soon as they finish the conversation, the recluse immediately asks the system to offer citizenship to his new acquaintances. Now, the right of access to the 30th floor is given to people from the street. This means that all these people accepted Jae-hyun's proposal, which is good news. Now the number of citizens has increased to 10 people, and the experience and money they earn has increased by 10%. Jae-hyun can't get enough of such impressive bonuses. He is ready to accept all these people with open arms. Thanks to the system, he sees the true level of strength of his new citizens, and immediately notices that Dong-gun has already reached level 23, which is equal to the strength of the Calican, whom the recluse himself killed recently. As expected, this Dong-gun is a superhuman and his awakened ability is a baseball throw. Depending on who is throwing the baseball, this item can be a good weapon. Dong-gun's skill increases the throwing power by 3 times, which is enough to destroy any monster. As for trust, Jae-hyun plans to simply increase it slowly. The guy sets the experience distribution coefficient for all 6 of them to 70%. Now all that's left is to give them monster hunting tasks, and the recluse himself can just sit and earn experience and money without making any effort. When the time comes, it is imperative that he get to know all of these people better, because they may be the key to his reunification with his family. Suddenly, a notification appears that citizen Dong-gon's trust has increased. Immediately afterwards, several more exactly the same notifications appear, but about other citizens. After some time, Hyun-jun brings new friends to his apartment. He is met at the door by his worried wife, but he asks the girl to cook some food and promises to explain everything to her a little later. She's not entirely happy with this, but her husband is sure that Jae-hyun has some kind of plan, so she needs to help him. The girl thinks for a second, weighing the pros and cons, but still decides to help. She asks the new arrivals to wait a little, and they bow gratefully, agreeing. Dong-gon looks around carefully, studying the situation. He decides to ask Hyun-jun what kind of person this Jae-hyun is. But to his regret, his new friend knows nothing about this guy, except that he is their neighbor. This makes Dong-gon think, Jae-hyun seems like quite an intriguing person to him. If everything in this apartment appeared thanks to this guy, then he is definitely a superhuman. He must have amazing abilities to create all these benefits. So Dong-gun decides that he must make a good impression on this man. After all, Jae-hyun is the one who is powerful enough to provide electricity, food, and water. In the modern world, this is simply an incredible miracle. It will take some time to prepare the food, so Hyun-jun suggests that the guests take a shower. The eyes of all the girls in this company immediately light up with delight. It didn't immediately occur to them that since there was electricity, they could use most of the amenities. This means that there is also hot water, which they all lacked so much. This part of Jae-hyun's abilities brings girls into indescribable delight. Hyun-jun says that there is a bathroom in both the living room and the bedroom, so two people can wash at the same time. The rest of the guys at this time begin to discuss the possibility that this Jae-hyun is also a superhuman like them. One of the guys wanted to suggest giving this Jae-hyun a good beating, but Dong-gun stopped him, suggesting instead that they make a good impression. He asks his friend to do nothing and just remain silent when they finally meet this person. Now their goal is to get as much food and water as possible. So Dong-gun asks the others not to screw up and to study this room well. The guys immediately agree. Their leader always suggests the right things, so they decide not to argue with him this time either. Only one of the guys stands silently nearby, not taking part in this conversation. Dong-gun will immediately notice his dejected and upset appearance. Ben-ho. He walks up to the guy and puts his hand on his shoulder, supporting and encouraging him. Dong-gun says he's very sorry that things turned out this way. If he hadn't invited them all to the housewarming party, then maybe things would have turned out differently. Ben-ho tries to calm him down and pretends that everything is okay. Dong-gun suggests that they have a snack and then all go to Ben-ho's grandmother's together. The guy looks down, barely holding back tears. He thinks to himself that it is probably already too late. There is almost no chance that the helpless elderly woman managed to survive. With such a rapid invasion of monsters, his grandmother most likely didn't even have a chance. Dong-gun tries to reassure the boy that his grandmother's house is already very close, so they can get to her if they work together. Ben-ho nods and is about to answer something but doesn't have time to do so. The boys hear some noise nearby and turn around. The door is slightly open, and there is some movement happening behind it. Dong-gon instantly tenses up and takes out his baseball. The door opens completely, and the man they have been waiting for so long enters the room. "I will help you all," says Jae-hyun. Perhaps this man can save them all. He will help them get out of this pit of despair and hopelessness. After some time, they all sit down at a small table. Haewon blushes and sheepishly apologizes for the fact that they are a little cramped. Dong-gon also sheepishly replies that there is nothing wrong with that, since they themselves came here without warning. The awkwardness is broken by Hyun-jun, who returns from the kitchen with several plates of food on a tray. He leans over slightly and carefully places plates in front of each person sitting at the table. Haewon is very embarrassed and isn't sure if her cooking will be to their taste at all. But the girls' fears turn out to be in vain. These people haven't seen home-cooked food for so long that it makes them incredibly excited. One of the girls freezes with chopsticks in her hand, as if she still can't believe that there is so much delicious food in front of her. "This is simply amazing," she screams after the first bite of the egg roll. Haewon blushes even more and replies that she did all this only thanks to Jae-hyun, because if he had not brought the food, she would have been able to offer the guests only naked rice and tangerines. The self-satisfied recluse notes that this girl's trust reached the 50 mark even before her husband did. "Thank you for the treat." There are enthusiastic cries from all sides. Superhumans can't contain their emotions, savoring every bite of the treat. Egg roll is especially popular. It is quite often served in Japanese restaurants, so it is in high demand. Haewon smiles happily as she watches the boys eat her cooking with such pleasure. Little So-yeon approaches her mother and quietly says that she wants a piece of egg roll too. Hae-won pats her on the head and promises to make the egg roll again after their guests have eaten. Hearing this, one of the girls waves her hand and calls the little girl to eat with her. There is no need to repeat it twice, and a joyful So-yeon instantly finds herself on the girl's lap. It looks so cute that everyone at the table starts to quietly laugh, while the girl picks up the most delicious piece with her chopsticks. She puts it in the baby's mouth, and So-yeon happily closes her eyes. The parents, flushed with shame, stand nearby, not knowing what to do with themselves. Jae-hyun asks them to join him for a meal, as there is enough food for everyone. Then let's have lunch together. The spouses laugh almost in unison. For a while there is silence at the table, broken only by the clatter of chopsticks on plates. Jae-hyun sadly thinks that he hasn't eaten such a delicious meal in a long time. He remembers the sweet note his mother put on his takeout container for him, and it makes him feel even sadder. The guy hopes that his family is okay and that they manage to survive. It doesn't take long before the plates are empty. So-yeon is already tired and asks her mother to put her to bed. Hae-won smiles warmly at the children and picks up the baby in her arms, preparing to carry her to the bedroom. Jae-hyun decides that the right moment has come and suggests that everyone else finish the interrupted conversation. The recluse asks why they can't go to their grandmother, who is very close. Dong-gon immediately becomes gloomy and explains that it's all because of the goblins. Jae-hyun doesn't quite understand what the problem is and asks again, and he learns that apparently the underground parking lot is a very convenient place for monsters to hide. So the goblins decided to make it their base. According to preliminary estimates, there are at least a couple thousand goblins in this place. The recluse ability only works up to the 30th floor, which is why the goblins can enter here through the underground levels. The superhumans saw that all the entrances to the apartments were connected to the subway, so they did not dare to go out. Jae-hyun suggests that they take other paths to do this, but he learns that a monster much more terrible and dangerous than ordinary goblins was spotted on the neighboring road. He looked like a cross between a wolf and a bear. When the superhumans encountered this monster, they were able to escape from it only due to a lucky coincidence. They were lucky that the monster was busy fighting a whole group of goblins. The description of this monster makes Jae-hyun think deeply. Dong-gon lowers his head guiltily, upset that they weren't able to get a better look at the creature due to the darkness. The recluse, after some thought, says that it is impossible to avoid these monsters forever. Dong-gon, however, does not share such enthusiasm and replies that they all have their limits. Limits? Jae-hyun asks, a little surprised. Superhumans use bows, throw baseballs, and do many other things, but sooner or later it all just ends. After listening to them, the guy asks to show him all the inventory. He thinks he can solve this problem. Picking up a baseball, Jae-hyun places it on his list. But for some reason, he can't do the same with the bow. The system demands a payment of 1.5 million won to add a compound bow in good condition to the list of items, and the guy has no choice but to agree. "Can you all use a bow?" he asks the instantly blushing superhumans. From their reaction, he understands that they do not know how to use such weapons, but he still buys 5 sets of bows and arrows at once. Even if you don't have any skills, this is a good chance to practice. Ben-ho looks at the kits in front of him and feels hope for saving his grandmother rise inside him again. Dong-gon is no less happy because now their hunting speed will increase significantly, since they no longer have to worry about the number of arrows. But still, before finding Grandma, you need to reduce the ranks of goblins as much as possible. "When will we start hunting them?" Dong-gon asks. Jae-hyun answers without hesitation that it will be tomorrow. The sooner they start, the better. If everything goes well, they will save Ben-ho's grandmother tomorrow. This statement delights the guy who has lost all hope. The more practical Dong-gon immediately asks how exactly they can do this, to which Jae-hyun replies that they will use a bait strategy. The superhumans listen carefully to the guy's proposed plan and come to certain conclusions. Maybe this plan is not as unrealistic as they initially thought. The main thing is that they are lucky and this strategy works. Meanwhile, a notification arrives that Choi Hyun-jun has completed his mission. Only now does Jae-hyun find out that he had to spend 30,000 won on this task. This means that only through the availability of money will he be able to raise the level of his citizens. There is no urgent need for this now, so you can wait a little with the tasks. Now that Hyun-jun's trust has reached 50, the recluse can register him as a vassal. This is exactly what the guy immediately decides to do. Hyun-jun suddenly notices a flashing bluish glow around his body, but he still doesn't understand what happened. The system notifies the master that the new vassal's awakened ability is gorilla power. Experience and money received for killing a monster are doubled, and the Absolute Eyes skill can now be used within a radius of 5 meters from the house. Suddenly, Jae-hyun notices the button to increase the vassal's level and presses it, to which the system demands a whole million won to carry out this command, and the guy is unpleasantly shocked by this. After recovering from the shock, he asks Mr. Choi how he feels. The man replies that he is filled with some new power and asks if this is his doing. He feels like he's at least 10 years younger. Pleased with these changes, Jae-hyun asks the newly minted vassal to also take part in the planned operation. Citizens receive 10% extra experience, and the vassal will be able to gain even more due to the double effect. So the recluse asks Hyun-jun to try and kill as many monsters as possible. I believe in you. He smiles happily at the frightened man. The next day comes and they set out on their journey. The first thing they decide to do is check the first floor, even though it is clearly in a deplorable state. This is the first task given by Jae-hyun. The group's task today is to find all the survivors and send them to a safe place on the 30th floor. In addition, they must attract and kill as many goblins as possible inside this house. They don't know what will come of it all, but they are determined to do everything possible to complete their first assignment. It is unknown which apartment they might encounter a goblin in, so Don-gon orders them all to be on guard. One by one, the guys go through all the apartments, starting with the 101st and further. When they enter the next one, they stop in horror. The girls cover their mouths with their hands to hold back the urge to gag. There are many mutilated corpses lying on the floor of this apartment, and this picture evokes horror and fear. Unfortunately, there is no one left to save here. "Let's get out of here," Don-gon commands as soon as he comes to his senses. They go into the next apartment, but there too they don't find anyone alive. On the first floor, no one had a chance of survival. Don-gon orders to quickly go up to the second floor, but no one is waiting for them there either. The same horrific picture appears before them as soon as they rise and go inside. Gritting his teeth in impotent rage, Don-gon orders them to go up to the next floor. There they are met by an oppressive silence, but there are no corpses in sight. Don-gon runs to the nearest door and knocks with all his might, loudly asking if there is anyone inside. No one answers, and the group moves on to the next apartment. Without losing hope, they pound their fists on each door with all their might. But no one opens the door for them, and there is not a single living soul in sight on the entire floor. When the doors run out, the superhumans realize that there is no one to save here either. Don-gon directs the group to the 4th floor. There they run up to each door again, shouting loudly that they are a rescue team and have come to help. Suddenly, one of the doors opens slightly. A haggard man peers out through a small crack and quietly asks if they really are from the rescue team. Don-gon enthusiastically confirms this, happy that they found at least one person. A man asks for some water to wet his dry throat. Just hearing this request, Don-gon immediately reaches for his backpack and unzips it. He takes out a small bottle of water and hands it to the man through the same crack in the door. Only now does the exhausted man finally realize that these people really did come to save him. Dong-gun promises to take him to a safer place, but the man still finds it difficult to believe him. However, this may be his only chance for salvation, which he must not miss. So the man opens the door completely, and now other people hidden behind his back become visible. He extends his hand to introduce himself and says, his name is Hong Jong-soo. Dong-gun happily shakes his hand, saying his name in response. He then sends Ga-yeon and Hai-rin to take those people to the 30th floor and then return back here. Jong-soo is extremely surprised by what he heard, because he thought that they were going to the 1st floor now, and not the highest one. But his son looks quite pleased, for some reason confident that they sent a whole helicopter for them. To his disappointment, this is not the case, but at least in the place where they are going, they can eat hot food and take a shower. The information about the shower delights his sister. Now they are ready to go anywhere. And the information that there is even hot water there completely dispels any doubts. The girl runs up to the rescue team and urges her father and brother to quickly climb up. Jong-soo looks at the other rescuers and suddenly realizes that he knows these guys. The rescue operation continues, and the number of citizens accepted has now reached 40 people. The first thing they did was place all the children and elderly people they found in the Choi family's apartment. For now, the youth will have to stay in the corridor. The rescue team searched all floors but could not find any more people. Apparently, not all residents were originally in the building. Choi Hyun-jun's apartment is almost full, but this should be enough. Jae-hyun uses his absolute vision skill to look around the entire house. He sees a tired Ben-ho dragging furniture to help make everyone who was rescued more comfortable. The rest of the guys keep up with him, helping as much as they can. Even girls make every effort to help the victims. Not to mention the guys who are carrying heavy loads with all their might and helping to set up the floor. After completing the inspection and making sure everything is okay, Jae-hyun returns to reality. Now that all survivors are safe, you can continue your mission. And the next stage is goblin hunting. So the rescue team comes together again to continue their mission. Donggon is going to hold a briefing. Now their main task is to lure out all the goblins that are hiding underground. And the guy is going to start from the -1st floor. He suggests splitting into 2 teams, provoking the creatures and cleaning them up. And then do the same with the -2nd floor. But there is a chance that there will be more goblins than they expect. Then the group may get stuck on the -1st floor, and if you also have to drag corpses, it will not be easy at all. However, now that they have such a huge number of arrows, all these prospects do not look too hopeless. But before they have time to properly discuss their next steps, a growl is heard very close by. The superhumans turn around sharply at the sound. Several evil goblins are already advancing directly towards them. The monsters' eyes glow red, and their sharp fangs flash dangerously even in the dark. One of the girls immediately grabs the bow in her hands and shoots the first arrow. In a few seconds, she manages to fire several arrows, and each of them hits the goblins right in the heads. The other guy grips his bat more tightly and also charges. One blow is enough to rip the monster's head off. There are only a few goblins, so defeating them is not particularly difficult. But immediately after, something strange starts to happen. "Look!" one of the girls screams, pointing her fingers in the direction of the dead goblins in amazement. All of a sudden, their corpses begin to dissolve into thin air. Ben-ho suspects that this is one of Jae-hyun's abilities, and this ability is very useful to them. Now there is one less problem. Ben-ho can't help but smile proudly. He thought from the beginning that Jae-hyun had some solution, and he wasn't disappointed. The recluse sits in his apartment at this time and carefully watches the pop-up notifications, rejoicing at the excellent timing. Although he had not planned it, it turned out that he was able to observe the rescue team. Suddenly, a new notification appears stating that Ben-ho has reached the required loyalty level and can now become a vassal. This is a bit surprising since only a few hours have passed since the group left. But for reasons unknown to Jae-hyun, this guy's loyalty had reached a whopping 88 points. So the recluse decides that the time has come to accept another vassal. Be that as it may, the more of them there are, the faster all citizens, including himself, will develop. Ben-ho, who was not expecting anything like this, suddenly notices a bright glow around him, and all the other superhumans also cannot help but notice such an unusual glow. This light comes in very handy, blinding the goblins and giving the humans a little respite. But very soon it turns out that everything is not so rosy. The glow also attracted other goblins who were previously unaware of the battle taking place. The monsters clutch their blinded eyes, growling in pain and anger. Donggon understands that there are now too many goblins and they need to escape from here urgently. Obeying his order, the group quickly retreats. Having run a little to the side, they stop and fire several sharp arrows at the monsters at once. But there are so many goblins that even after losing several of their fellows at once, their total number does not visually decrease. However, despite this, no one is going to give up so easily. Arrows fly into the crowd of monsters one after another, each time hitting the target perfectly. But the goblins pay absolutely no attention to the corpses of their fellows under their feet, easily walking forward right over the dead bodies. And it seems that their number is only increasing, no matter how hard people try. "There are too many of them!" Ben-ho shouts, running as fast as he can next to Donggun. No one even imagined that they would attract such a huge crowd of these freaks. Apparently, they all came up here from the -2nd floor. The only chance to escape now is the fire escape, which they managed to reach with difficulty. Now, the most important thing is to close the door leading there, but the huge paws of the pressing goblins prevent this from being done. Altogether, the guys rush at this door in an attempt to finally slam it shut. But the goblins don't give up either, pushing their limbs with all their might into the remaining gap between the door and the wall. Even with the combined efforts of several guys, it is impossible to close the entrance to the fire escape. "Move aside!" Suddenly, a loud cry from Mr. Choi is heard. Hyun-jun activates his gorilla power to help everyone else. The guys obediently scatter to the sides and Hyun-jun slams the ill-fated door with just one blow. "Get out quickly!" he screams as he uses all the strength he has to hold the monsters back at the door. The man's entire body is tense to the limit, and every muscle aches from the unbearable load. Hyun-jun thinks that he must cope and save everyone else at any cost. After all, no one else can do this except him. "We're safe, come here quickly!" Donggun shouts to Mr. Choi. The exhausted man is finally able to let go of the door, which he does immediately. Hyun-jun runs as fast as he can towards Donggun, who is waiting for him. But in his haste, he twists his leg and falls painfully to the floor, while behind him the goblins are already opening the door to rush after him. Deciding that this is the end, He asks Dong to leave him here and run away without him. The guy only has time to curse, frozen for a second in indecision. Just in time, Doksu comes to the rescue with his baseball bat. After killing the nearest goblin with one blow, the boy extends his hand to Mr. Choi. The man tries unsuccessfully to crawl to Doksu, but he is already firmly held by several pairs of goblin hands. Doksu was about to rush to help again, but suddenly there was a bright flash of light and something strange happened. The guy looks in amazement at the completely empty space where Hyunjun had just been lying. The goblins realize the loss of their victim much faster than he does, and even more embittered, they rush forward. The nearest monster quickly jumps up and is about to land right on Doksu. The guy manages to react in time and throws the goblin back with a powerful blow of the bat. Meanwhile, Donggun is joined by the rest of the superhumans, and they begin shooting at the goblins, giving Dongsu a chance to return to them. The guy runs back to the group with all his might, and behind him, several loudly growling goblins rush after him. Doksu runs to the stairs, and this gives him a little more strength. Donggun is already pulling back his bowstring, ready to fire another arrow at any goblin that gets too close to his friend. "Come on!" he shouts loudly, and Gayon with him, continuing to release arrow after arrow. Doksu makes a dash forward, slightly breaking away from the crowd of goblins. It's pretty quiet and gloomy outside at this time, with almost black clouds floating by, sometimes blocking the moon, and then everything around becomes a little darker. Somewhere nearby, a huge brown bear with brightly glowing eyes is tearing another goblin to pieces. Blood splatters in all directions, leaving scarlet marks on the pavement. "We need more," the bear thinks, furiously biting into another monster. Suddenly hearing something, the bear turns around and looks carefully into the distance, immediately noticing the only illuminated window on the 30th floor of the nearest high-rise building. "Kill at any cost?" Another thought flashes through the head of the embittered animal. Hyunjun suddenly finds himself falling to the floor of the now very familiar corridor on the 30th floor, and immediately hears Jay's voice, Hena, who says that trouble almost happened. Without understanding anything, Mr. Choi raises his head and adjusts his glasses that have fallen off the bridge of his nose. Jae-hyun, meanwhile, bends down a little and extends his hand to him. The guy decided to observe the situation just in case using the skill of absolute eyes, and he was right. It's good that he has the skill to summon a vassal, otherwise things could have ended much worse. But even so, Hyunjun still managed to get several injuries. The man's right leg is quite bloody, but he is confident that it is just a scratch that will heal quickly. Jae-hyun understands that he needs to stock up on a variety of medications. He asks Mr. Choi to wait a bit and returns to the apartment. There, he finds a first aid kit and carefully examines its contents. This small box brings back memories of his childhood, where his mother treated him with medicines that didn't taste the best. And now this first aid kit will come in handy again. The guy takes out all the contents and puts them on the table. He only has 40 slots, but he will have to order quite a lot of farm. Now this need has become obvious. And then an idea comes to his mind. There is absolutely no need for him to order each medicine separately. The pleased guy puts the entire first aid kit into the new slot. He replenishes all the used medicine and carries the first aid kit to Hyunjun. Sitting down closer to the man, he asks to let him examine his wound. Hyunjun is a little embarrassed by such concern, but still pulls up his pants leg, exposing the scratch. The first thing Jae-hyun decides to do is disinfect the wound. He soaks a small piece of cotton wool in the required solution and carefully touches the scratch. But even such a barely perceptible touch makes Hyunjun hiss in pain through his teeth. When the boy finally finishes treating the damage, Mr. Choi's trust and loyalty increases a little more. Jae-hyun hopes the rest of the guys are okay. He suggests that Hyunjun take a little rest while he finishes some work. The guy activates the Absolute Eyes skill again to inspect the underground floors. Now he can see that the battle with the goblins is in full swing. Thanks to the large number of arrows, the guys are still holding up well. "Doksu, run!" Donggun shouts at the top of his lungs, continuing to shoot the goblins rushing after the guy. There were literally just a few flights of stairs left before he finally reached the rest of the boys. The goblins follow him closely, trying their best to reach their prey with their long paws topped with sharp claws. Doksu's face was flushed from the strain, and his eyes were filled with beads of salty sweat, obscuring his normal vision. The goblins accelerate and, pushing off the ground with their powerful paws, jump into the air, almost catching up with the guy. Ben-ho, seeing this, rushes to help. He swings and hits the goblins with the handle of his bow, killing several monsters at once. Not stopping there, the guy again rushes into the thick of the crowd of goblins. Ben-ho tirelessly kills goblin after goblin without stopping for a second. Behind him, Donggon and Doksu, who had already reached him, scream in surprise. For the first time, they see Ben-ho so warlike and angry. Jae-hyun realizes that they are doing quite well. Another notification window appears, offering to equip Ben-ho with the teleportation skill, which allows him to move around space using mental power. Apparently, registering this guy as a vassal was a very good decision. Meanwhile, Kim Gon, at the request of his boss, put the extension cord they found into combat readiness. The other guys were dealing with the water tank at the time, but they also managed to cope successfully. So Dong-gun, after making sure that everything is done, urgently calls Ben-ho back to them. Hearing the order, the boy runs back to the group, jumping over several piles of furniture created by the group along the way. Once he reaches safety, Dong-gun and the others throw down a water tank. The goblins, not expecting this, freeze in surprise, not understanding what it is. The tank explodes, and streams of cold water drench the monsters, making the monsters even more angry. Dong-gun gives a new command, and his order is immediately carried out. All it takes is one press of the power strip button to set their plan into action. An electric discharge, amplified by water, rushes throughout the room. All the goblins received a powerful electric shock, and the space around them was filled with the smell of burnt wiring and scorched flesh. Jae-hyun immediately receives multiple notifications about successfully killing goblins and adding experience and money to his wallet. The level of existing skills was increased and one new one was acquired. The recluse was racked with a strange pain, and purple streams of powerful energy began to spread out in all directions around him. The system notifies that hostile creatures have been detected, so Jae-hyun issues the order to destroy, and his power envelops all the goblins gathered below. Another second and the monsters are instantly torn into many small pieces. At this time, quite a few hostile goblins had gathered on the second floor. None of them managed to notice someone else's quiet steps in time. One of the goblins turns around when he notices that he has been covered by someone's huge shadow. Right behind the monster's back, a huge bear with eyes that glow brightly in the dark grows. Without waiting for the other goblins to notice the danger, he roars loudly and rushes to attack. The bear sinks its sharp fangs into the goblin's shoulder, and the sound of breaking bones is heard. The other goblins look in horror at the huge animal that suddenly appeared right in their midst. Having finished with the first goblin, the bear is already approaching the rest. Claws, sharp as daggers, sparkle in the dim light of the second floor below. His massive body, covered in thick fur, seemed clumsy, but in fact his movements were lightning fast. Realizing that they couldn't stand alone, several goblins looked at each other and decided to act together. The bear spun around in place, dodging the random blows, and at the same time methodically knocked out his opponents one after another. But this did not stop the goblins at all. On the contrary, they continued their attack with redoubled enthusiasm. The bear tirelessly grabbed them by the necks, threw them against the walls, and broke bones with one movement of his powerful paws. Not lagging behind him, the goblins dug into the bear's flesh with their sharp teeth, tearing out fur and pieces of flesh. The goblin, clinging to the bear's scruff, acted with incredible fury and agility, his razor-sharp teeth covered in dark saliva, biting into the animal's flesh again and again. The bear, seemingly gathering its last strength, let out such a deafening roar that several goblins retreated back. But almost immediately, the monsters continued to fight fiercely, trying to get to the most vulnerable places, where the skin was thinner. At what point did it become obvious that the bear was losing? He could not cope with such a huge number of enemies. But suddenly, some unknown force saved him from certain death, simply blowing up all the goblins around him. The bear looked around in surprise, not understanding where the help had come from, and a system notification window informed him that citizenship had just been granted. Realizing that the danger was no longer there, the beast was finally able to relax and assume its true form. In less than a minute, the huge brown bear turned into a fragile, long-haired girl. As soon as the transformation was complete, she immediately fell to the floor, exhausted, and lost consciousness. Now, Jae-hyun can also take a little breather. Using the Absolute Eye skill, he observed this fight from the very beginning. And now, he looks with concern at the defenseless figure of the girl lying on the floor among many dead goblins. The system suggests that the girl's name is Oh On-ju, and she is a werewolf bear. During her transformation into a beast, all physical abilities and regeneration reach their maximum. To the recluse's surprise, Anju was level 33 and also had an A-rank ability. The latest notifications about increasing trust come just in time, and now Jae-hyun calmly begins registering new vassals. He accepts Kang Dok-soo, who is level 25 and has the title of Third Servant, as his vassal. His awakened ability, Steel Knight, summons a steel armor that protects his entire body and a halberd. The vassal's level depends on his awakened ability. For example, Choi Hyun-jun with his C-rank ability is level 20, and Kang Dok-soo is level 25 and has a B-rank ability. Lastly, Moon Byung-ho has an A-rank teleportation ability and is level 30. The moment Jae-hyun registers them as vassals, the level is determined based on the awakened ability. The recluse suspects that the rank is assigned randomly. If Byung-ho got a rank due to his loyalty, then Hyun-jun with a higher loyalty score should have gotten B rank instead of C rank. In fact, Dok-soo, with a loyalty rating of 31, received a B rank ability. Jae-hyun thinks it would be good to know under what conditions people obtain high-ranking abilities. This is an extremely important task, since he can only register a dozen vassals, and naturally, it is much more profitable to get people with a higher rank. The problem is that Jae-hyun doesn't know what exactly will happen if he accepts a person with an already awakened ability as a vassal. It is only known that people with already awakened abilities can move freely along stairs, elevators, and corridors. Jae-hyun uses the absolute eye skill again to see if that bear girl has woken up. But she still lies lifeless on the cold floor of the corridor among many dead goblins. The recluse understands that the girl herself will not be able to climb up here. Therefore, he decides to entrust this task to Hyun-jun. Just then, the elevator arrives and its doors open. Jae-hyun asks Mr. Choi to bring here the woman who is currently on the -2nd floor. Meanwhile, the rest of the group carefully descends the stairs and approaches the dead goblins. Dok-soo chuckles thoughtfully when he sees the state of their corpses. Now it becomes clear to everyone that the goblins were simply torn apart by someone's influence. This makes Dong-gon think deeply. After all, if someone has an ability of this level, then this is clearly someone truly great. The guy recalls that even at the beginning of their acquaintance, Mr. Choi claimed that Jae-hyun was a very outstanding person, and it was this man who, by some miracle, was able to return hot water to the apartments. At the time, this news had sent everyone into a frenzy of delight, but only now had he finally realized how outstanding this ability was. Moreover, even the ingredients for cooking were somehow provided by Jae-hyun. It was most likely this guy's ability that tore the goblins apart today. Dong-gun is also a little worried about the strange things happening to Ben-ho. This guy was always the quietest and most withdrawn of them all. But after meeting Kim Jae-hen, became a completely different person, and such significant changes are even frightening. So no matter what abilities this guy has, there is only one conclusion to be drawn from all this. In this damned world, in order to survive, you must at all costs be chosen by this person. Even the recluse, who is unaware of such thoughts, is closely watching Hyun-jun's every step at this time. He must make sure that everything goes as it should, and that this bear girl will soon be safe without any complications. Ju herself is now seeing a dream that is more like her worst nightmare. She had seen this dream memory many times before, but each of them brought her unbearable pain. That day, she stood very close to her son as he played with his car, but still not close enough. The girl watched the child play with a smile, not even suspecting the impending danger. The boy happily waves his hand at her, not noticing that there is someone behind him. Anju's face suddenly turns pale when she realizes what's happening. The girl opens her eyes in horror, already knowing in advance that she won't make it in time. Behind her son, there are 3 huge goblins and only a few seconds remain before the tragedy. The girl suddenly rushes forward, trying to reach the child in time. Only now does the boy finally turn around and notice the monsters leaning over him. Hee-ju doesn't have time to run to his son. A few seconds later, it's all over and all that's left on the floor is the bloody car her child was playing with. At this point, Anju suddenly wakes up, her heart beating so hard that it feels like it's going to jump out of her chest. Jae-hyun calls her name, and the girl turns her head towards the voice. The guy freezes hesitantly, not knowing how to start the conversation correctly. Hee-ju sits up on the bed and clutches his head. The recluse extends his hand to her and says his name to introduce himself. "Did you do this?" Instead of shaking hands, the girl answers. Jae-hyun doesn't immediately understand what she's talking about. Then Anju reminds her that the goblins she fought all had their heads torn off. Now the recluse understands what is being said and hesitantly removes the outstretched hand. "That's right," he says. Hee-ju looks at this guy thoughtfully. His ability was so strong that all those goblins had their heads torn off in an instant, and there were quite a few of them. She hadn't allowed herself to hope for a long time, but now she couldn't drive these thoughts away. Maybe this is the person who can help her? Jae-hyun still looks at the girl tensely, not knowing what to expect from her. "Save my son," she suddenly says. More than anything in the world, she would like to see her child at least one more time. Unable to control herself any longer, the girl once again falls into hysterics, swallowing bitter tears. Jae-hyun realizes that she lost her child to the goblins. He looks at the sobbing girl and doesn't know what to do now. Is there really no way out? He decides to contact the system, and it unexpectedly offers to catch 1,000 goblins. And as a reward for completing this task, he will receive the resurrection of Onju's son. The guy resolutely reaches out to the notification window to take this task, but to his great regret, he receives the answer that this task cannot be obtained. This means that he still doesn't have enough strength to revive a person. And then the system explains the refusal by saying that there is not enough money at the moment to complete the task, and this shocks Jae. Henna. It turns out that he can take on such a task after all. This means that he can resurrect a person from the dead and all he needs is money. It is still difficult to even imagine how much money will be needed for the resurrection. But the main thing is that it is possible. So Jae-hyun calls out to Onju, and she immediately turns to him with hope. The recluse quietly says that perhaps he can help her. This exhausted girl only needs one hope to gain strength, Ju asks, not believing his ears. In response, she hears that it is possible, but not right now. However, there is definitely a way. Onju agrees to anything, just to get her child back. Ha Dong-gun's party now includes Dok-soo and Byung-ho with awakened abilities, and if you add Onju with her level 33, it will become much easier to deal with most of the monsters. It's best to make all 7 of them vassals, so after making his decision, Jae-hyun asks Onju to get out of bed so he can introduce her to the other members of the group. Dong-gun is the first to extend his hand to the girl. With a polite smile, he says his name, but suddenly finds out that Onju already knows it. "You fight goblins by throwing baseballs at them, right?" she asks, and Dong-gun's eyes widen in shock. Heju also knows the girl next to him, because she has seen her shoot a bow many times. Ga-yeon, not hiding her surprise, asks how this girl knows them all. In response, Onju smirks and suggestively imitates the growl of a bear. However, the group still remains perplexed and silent, not recognizing the fierce beast in this girl. And then, Onju decides to show them visually and smoothly flows into his second form. Gradually, her body becomes covered with fur, and her figure changes its outline. And only now do the guys understand who exactly is standing in front of them. "It's that beast!" Ga-yeon screams. With a cheerful smile, Onju corrects her, explaining that she is not a bear, but a she-bear. She had already helped these guys several times, so they remembered this bear very well. The goblin's enemy is her friend, so the girl is sure that they will get along. Jae-hyun is glad that they actually already know each other. Now he has something to tell them all, an operation to save Moon. Byung-ho's grandmother will be carried out tomorrow morning. The number of goblins has dwindled, and this can be used to save her. Only Hyun-jun will miss the surgery as his injury is still lingering. Ju will take part in tomorrow's operation instead of him. The girl is not at all averse to working with the group, and Jae-hyun suggests that they gather early in the morning to begin the rescue operation. The boys happily agree. The recluse then turns to Dok-soo and Byung-ho, which surprises and unsettles them a little. The guy asks them to go out into the hallway for a moment, and they have no choice but to do so. Jae-hyun asks as they all walk out of the apartment together. From the guys' faces, he immediately understands that they don't even have a clue. However, after a minute of silence, they begin to understand what this might be connected with. Is it our strength? Ben-ho is the first to guess. Jae-hyun confirms with a smile that his guess is correct. He says that this time they both woke up. Ben-ho gained the ability to teleport, and Dok-soo received an ability called Steel Knight. Before tomorrow's operation, we need to find out what these two are now capable of. So Jae-hyun turns to the system to give the boys a task. He is offered a group task to demonstrate awakened abilities, the failure of which will result in a night in the corridor, and the reward will be increased strength. Jae-hyun decides to take advantage of this offer and issues a task. He is distracted by an impatient Dok-soo, who is very eager to know what exactly his new ability is. The recluse explains that the boy can now summon steel armor and a halberd. Before Dok-soo could digest this information, Ben-ho, who was standing next to him, suddenly disappeared. The guy screams indignantly, immediately starting to envy such a cool ability. Together with Jae-hyun, they look around in search of Ben-ho, who has disappeared from sight. A few seconds later, the missing young man appears next to them out of nowhere. "It worked!" The guy cries out with delight. He already imagines how much he can do now, having such a wonderful ability. Ben-ho's trust soars and he bows low to the recluse, expressing his gratitude. However, Jae-hyun will have to upset him a little. He tells the instantly saddened boy that right now, he won't be able to go to his grandmother with this ability. At this point, there is no guarantee that he will be able to master the new skill without consequences. Perhaps he was just lucky to teleport so successfully this time, but next time this might not happen. The first thing to do is figure out what the maximum distance he can move is and what the penalty will be for using this ability. They are distracted from their conversation by noise coming from Doksu. The guy, having looked at Ben-ho with his cool ability, decided to try to use his own. It worked, he screams, looking with delight at his body, encased in beautiful armor. Jae-hyun, ignoring the happy guy, calls out to Ben-ho. The recluse asks the guy to try to teleport to the window of the house across the street. Ben-ho still doesn't fully understand how to use his new skill properly, but nevertheless, he agrees to try. Then Jae-hyun creates a new task for the guy to get his reward. Concentrating, Ben-ho carefully calls upon his powers. In a split second, he dissolves into thin air and the place where he had just stood appears empty. The guy himself, as planned, ends up on the top floor of the house opposite. It worked. He cries out joyfully when he realizes exactly where he is. Jae, who is looking at him, Hyunwoo and Doksu were almost jumping with joy. The system counts the task as completed, and the recluse breathes a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Ben-ho continues to wave his arms, but for some reason his movements begin to slow down, and eventually the guy's eyes roll back and he passes out. Jae-hyun and Deok-soo watch in horror as he falls. Before it is too late, the recluse calls his vassal to him. To his delight, the summoning is successful and Ben-ho's body appears right in front of them. The guys carry the victim back to the room and lay him down on the bed. Apparently, the movement requires a lot of endurance since he lost consciousness. Luckily, he'll be fine, we just need to give him some rest. Do you by any chance do any sports? The recluse suddenly asks Doksu. Having heard a positive answer, he gives the young man an assignment. This is an armor training session where Doksu must do exactly 100 push-ups and squats. The guy has only 10 minutes to complete this task, during which he must manage to do it. The reward for completing the task will be an increase in strength, and in case of failure, he will have to sleep in the open air. Since Doksu is a student of the physical education department and has incredible endurance, he was more than able to complete the task, although it took a lot of effort. Jae-hyun turns his gaze to the system window where the assessment of this task is currently taking place. This has never happened before and it makes the guy a little tense. Now can we finish? Distracts him from contemplating the window, Doksu. Having come to his senses, the recluse allows the guy to go and rest a little. The system meanwhile completes the assessment and shows that the task was successfully completed. Also, the strength has been increased slightly. Jae-hyun looks at his hands in surprise, enveloped in glowing energy, and realizes that it is his power that is being talked about. He didn't expect at all that thanks to the task completed by Doksu, it would be his own powers that would increase. This changes the situation completely. The next morning, as agreed, the rescue team begins the operation and almost immediately runs into a crowd of goblins. "Run!" Dongon shouts to the boys, but they don't need this order. They are already running away as fast as they can. An angry Doksu looks back at the crowd of monsters and decides to try out his new abilities in action. When the boy's figure is enveloped in a bright light, the goblins stop hesitantly. In place of the practically unarmed guy, a knight in armor suddenly appears, and he no longer seems such easy prey to them. Using his halberd, Doksu easily cuts off the limbs of the goblin closest to him. With the next few precise movements, he gets to the rest of the gaping monsters. Having lost several of their brothers at once, the frightened goblins rush to flee. With a warlike cry, Doksu swings his halberd again, loudly cursing at the cowardly fleeing monsters. But the monsters are unable to escape. Each of them is struck by an arrow straight to the head. Doksu lets out a surprised cry when he notices this. Ben-ho suddenly appears right in front of him and asks him not to worry about the fleeing goblins because he will take care of them himself. This news makes Doksu even more enthusiastic. With renewed strength, he rushes into the attack again. But the remaining goblins, who had already realized the hopelessness of their situation, turned around and quickly left the battlefield. But even there, an unpleasant surprise awaits them. A huge brown bear appears right in front of the surprised monsters. The monsters realize that their end has come. Now the goblins can't escape, so Ben-ho and Doksu run up to the bear, happily helping her deal with the rest of the monsters. The beast cuts off heads with one blow of its paw, and splashes of bright red blood fly in all directions. "Ben-ho, now!" Donggun suddenly shouts. At first, the guy doesn't understand what the boss wants from him. Then Donggun shouts at him again, ordering him to go get his grandmother immediately. He doesn't need to be told twice, and having received permission, Ben-ho is already rushing to the right house. Jae-hyun, meanwhile, watches the fascinating spectacle of monsters being slaughtered with the help of the Absolute Eyes. Onju completed the task given to her, and the system credited more than 130,000 won to the recluse's account. In the case of the quest for Doksu, the reward was an increase in strength, not money. This means that rewards are given out randomly in such tasks. Ben-ho also completed all possible quests for today, and now the system is slowly loading the reward for this work. Unexpectedly, the reward turns out to be some kind of jackpot. This has never happened before, so Jae-hyun is quite surprised. In addition to the unknown jackpot, he also gets skill points, which makes him even happier. Meanwhile, Ben-ho runs as fast as he can towards his grandmother's house. He teleports several times to get there faster, which drains a fair amount of his strength. Finally, he gets to the house he needs. There are no traces of monsters nearby, and this gives hope that everything might still be okay with the grandmother. Ben-ho runs into the house and loudly calls for his grandmother. To his insane joy, he finds her alive and well, lying in her bed. The guy immediately runs closer and falls to his knees next to her to feel her pulse. The grandmother tries to say something, but the exhausted woman doesn't even have the strength for that. But still, she immediately recognizes her grandson and quietly whispers his name. This makes Ben-ho cry loudly in joy and relief that she is okay. Although he did not lose hope until the last moment, he was still very afraid to enter this house and not find her alive. The grandmother sits up on the bed with the last of her strength, and the guy hugs her tightly, continuing to burst into tears. It seems to him that he walked here for too long, but the main thing is that he made it in time, and it's only thanks to Jae-hyun. The surprised recluse at that moment receives a notification that Ben-ho's loyalty and trust have reached 100 units and he is now registered as a vassal. A vassal management board opens in front of him and there is a plus sign next to each person to raise his level higher. Jae-hyun experimentally reaches his finger towards the plus sign next to Ben-ho to try out the feature. But nothing works because leveling up this guy costs a whole 100 million won, which is not in the wallet right now. The frustrated recluse realizes that he will now have to give his vassals quests every day to help them level up. And then suddenly the guy hears the sound of the elevator arriving. Since he's not expecting anyone yet, the guy activates the absolute vision skill again. Now he sees a guy and a girl who have come up to his floor. Their faces are unfamiliar to him. He has never met or seen them anywhere before. The two knock on the Choi family's door and Hye-won immediately gets a little scared. "Who's there?" the girl asks and opens the door. The stranger in front of her, rubbing the back of her head in embarrassment, introduces herself as Kim Da-bin. There is a guy standing next to her with a box on his shoulder. His name is Min-ho, and he is her younger brother. According to Da-bing, they live in apartment number 1701, and they came here because they have one request. Hye-won raises her eyebrows in surprise, asking what kind of request this is. Da-bin blushes even more, but still makes up her mind and quickly voices her request out loud. She knows it sounds very impudent, but she would still like to ask to take a shower in their apartment at least once. Hye-won's mouth opens in surprise, as she expected the request to be much more serious. "Just in case," she asks again, and Da-bin, blushing embarrassedly, asks again for permission to wash. No less embarrassed, Hye-won opens the door wider, inviting the boys to come in and use the shower. "Where should I put the box?" Min-ho asks. This box contains a variety of canned goods. Min-ho opens it, and Hye-won looks at the neat rows of neatly stacked jars with admiration. How can you do without gifts when you show up at someone else's house with strange requests? Da-bin laughs, still embarrassed. The bats, bows, and arrows neatly stacked in the corner. She asks in surprise who owns all these weapons. Hye-won replies that it's a long story, but the guns don't belong to the residents of this house. At this point, Jae-hyun decides to stop his observation. These guys definitely don't look like bad people, so he decides to see them sometime later and talk. Moreover, together they can try to save people from another high-rise building. Suddenly, a notification appears in front of the guy that a red tiger was caught, for which he was awarded quite a lot of experience and 39 million won. And also, another new skill was acquired. Jae-hyun realizes that he missed a lot and again uses his absolute vision to return to the guys from the rescue team. He sees tired, bloody people, a defeated tiger and a lifeless bear lying nearby. What could have happened there? The recluse thinks tensely. The system informs the guy that creatures have been discovered that meet the requirements for obtaining the status of citizens. Without hesitation, Jae-hyun grants citizenship to all the remaining people. Now the number of its citizens has reached 50. The experience points and money they earned have increased by 100%, and the skill, Power of Trust, has appeared. He looks back and sees Ben-ho, who is running forward with his grandmother in his arms, not sparing himself. Everyone else runs after him, but the rather tired Doksu carries the bloody Onju on his shoulders. Jae-hyun realizes that the girl is seriously injured. Right in front of the running boys, a new group of angry goblins suddenly appears. Hae-rin and Kim-gon, who are slightly behind the others, raise their bows and begin shooting. To their great surprise, each of their arrows kills any goblin on the first hit. The other guys also notice that their bodies suddenly become very light and their breathing evens out. Jae-hyun realizes that it is because of the new skill, Power of Trust, that increased all abilities by a value equal to the trust of each member of the group. Almost everyone in Donggun's squad has a trust level of 50 or higher. And now all of their abilities, such as endurance, vigilance, muscle strength, reaction, and others, have increased by at least 50%. Ben-ho is the first to realize that it's all about Jae's strength, Hena. Now the loyalty of Kim Ga-yeon and Yoo Hye-rin has also increased to the required values, and Jae-hyun immediately registers them as vassals. The surprised girls notice a bright blue glow around them and do not understand what is happening. Ga-yeon receives the title of Fourth Servant and the awakened ability, Piercing Shot. With renewed strength, the girl pulls the bowstring and begins to attack. She fires just one shot, and the arrow hits its target, taking off the head of the first goblin. But then something strange happens, because the arrow continues its flight and immediately catches up with the rest of the goblins, hitting each of them in turn. This skill is called Piercing Shot, and it consumes mental resources to fire an arrow that pierces the target. Jae-hyun gives the girl a new task: kill 10 goblins using this skill in 10 minutes. He thinks this ability is quite controversial. Hae-rin also gained a B-rank ability called Poison Mist, which also consumes mental resources to release a mist of deadly poison. If used incorrectly, this ability can harm the party members, and Jae-hyun decides to study it in more detail later. Now he intends to get to know the residents below. The recluse uses his Absolute Eye skill again to see what these people are doing. He sees a guy walking somewhere with a small bottle in his hands. Jae-hyun realizes that they brought drinking water in advance, which is very reasonable. It is for this reason that they have no need to join Donggun's squad. These people successfully stocked up on food and water. Suddenly, Jae-hyun notices a girl lying motionless on the floor. Only after realizing who she is does he immediately rush to help. This girl's name is Kim Da-young, and her awakened ability is healing. "It's a healer!" Jae-hyun shouts joyfully, continuing to run further. Finally, the guy runs to the apartment he needs. A little hesitantly, he opens the door and looks inside. The door is locked with a latch from the inside, so Jae-hyun can't get into the apartment. He remembers his new skill very well. This is the invisible hand of the absolute recluse of the first level. With this skill, you can summon an invisible hand and control it for your own purposes. By concentrating, the recluse activates the desired skill. Obeying the will of the owner, the invisible hand takes the form of huge nippers. The guy immediately pushes them through the door crack and places a latch between the blades. One effort and an invisible hand breaks the bolt in half. Jae-hyun immediately opens the door all the way and rushes into the room. He runs up to the girl lying motionless on the floor and kneels down next to her. "Come to your senses!" He tries to wake the healer. Apparently, this girl is even worse off than he initially thought. Judging by her appearance and dry lips, it looks like she's severely dehydrated. Panicked, Jae-hyun looks around for something that might help, and his gaze immediately catches something strange. A few steps away from the girl, there is a nearly full bottle of water. Jae-hyun is determined to save her no matter what. To do this, he decides to use the system again. He gives the girl a task, to take one breath, and she does it, for which she immediately receives a cure for dehydration as a reward. She gradually comes to her senses and opens her eyes, but the silhouettes still seem a little blurry to her. "Who are you?" the girl whispers quietly. Jae-hyun replies that he is her upstairs neighbor and came to help. He thought she was in critical condition, so he broke the lock and came in. Suddenly, the girl starts crying loudly. She covers her face with her hands and her shoulders shake with strong sobs. Jae-hyun looks at her in confusion, not understanding the reason for such behavior, but he still abruptly interrupts her hysteria with a request for help. He tells Da-jon that his friend is badly injured and needs medical attention. The girl looks at him in bewilderment, not knowing how she can help. What is this guy even talking about, she thinks. She thinks it's complete nonsense that he thinks she has the power to help anyone. What surprises her even more is that this guy apparently knows that she is a nurse and can treat people. But since he asks for help, he probably doesn't pose any danger. So the girl decides to find out more about this man and agrees to help. Jae-hyun immediately creates a new quest that requires using healing power to cure Anju. He turns to Da-jong again and asks her to rest and eat while he brings someone who needs treatment here. At first, the girl doesn't understand what kind of food they're talking about. But then Jae-hyun uses the system again to get some tangerines. "Stop!" screams a frightened Da-jon. She asks to explain what this is and where all these tangerines come from. But Jae-hyun just smiles in response and promises to explain everything, but a little later. The girl is very weak now, so the first thing she should do is rest. Still a little scared and tense, Da-jon nevertheless listens and cautiously picks up the nearest tangerine. She is sure that she is just dreaming all this. Jae-hyun leaves her apartment and heads back to his own. Very soon a new notification arrives that the healer's trust has increased slightly. The guy still can't believe that everything happened so suddenly. The guys from Dongon's squad should already be here, but for some reason, they are still nowhere to be seen. He looks out into the street and his eyes immediately widen in surprise. He sees a huge red tiger very close to his house. The beast chases the tired and wounded guys from the squad. Jae-hyun can't believe his eyes. He didn't expect to see another red tiger so soon. This beast is simply huge. Its bright yellow eyes and sharp fangs inspire horror and fear. Jae-hyun can't help but be surprised as he looks at the monster closely. He thought that the most difficult part of this operation was already behind him, but he was very much mistaken. The red tiger is almost catching up with Dongon's squad. Suddenly, Hai-rin twists her ankle and falls right in front of the monster. Donggun and the others turn around when they hear her pained cry. The girl tries to get up, but she no longer has the strength or time to do so. "No!" Ga-yeon screams in fear. Rin, who had somehow gotten up, a huge red tiger had already opened its fanged mouth. The girl clenches her teeth and turns around, realizing that she doesn't have time to escape. The tiger roars loudly and almost touches her body with his fangs. However, when he finally bites and clamps his jaws, there is no one between them. In the place where the girl stood, only a reflection of someone else's energy remained, and the tiger looked around in bewilderment. Hai-rin herself suddenly finds herself on the floor of Jae's apartment. Hina. He himself stands opposite her, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. This girl was on edge today. Thanks to the fact that Jae-hyun literally pulled her out of the tiger's jaws, the guys got a small head start. Now they have a better chance of escaping from this red tiger. Suddenly, Ben-ho teleports right into the middle of the room with his grandmother in his arms. He asks to take care of her and is going to go back to help the rest of the squad. But Jae-hyun asks him not to do that and to wait a little. Ben-ho finds it difficult to obey him, but the recluse looks very confident. Therefore, the guy still does not dare to disobey him and remains in place. Meanwhile, the red tiger continues to chase the rapidly fleeing squad. Jae-hyun activates his invisible hand skill in hopes of helping them. He must catch this red tiger at any cost. Donggon, who is not yet aware of these plans, suddenly stops abruptly. He understands that they all cannot be saved, so he decides to at least delay the monster for a while to give the others a chance. With a good swing, he throws a baseball at the tiger. But this does not cause any visible harm to the monster. The tiger only becomes even more angry, and his ferocious growl can be heard throughout the area. Ga-yeon turns around at the sound of this roar and immediately understands what their boss is up to. But it's too late, and she doesn't have time to help him. Donggon looks at the raging beast and clearly realizes that the end is near. "Run!" he shouts to the others, and he himself rushes in the other direction from the detachment. He runs forward as fast as he can, leading the tiger behind him. He himself will definitely not be saved, but now at least his squad will be safe. The tiger roars loudly again, almost catching up with the weakened man. Its mouth is wide open, so that rows of razor-sharp teeth are clearly visible. Donggon turns around and looks in horror at the huge fangs of the monster right behind him. The guy grits his teeth, preparing for the worst. An unexpected salvation comes in the form of Jae's invisible hand Henna, who again took the form required by the owner. The tiger tries to resist, but this time the enemy is stronger than him. An invisible hand wraps itself around the monster's neck, restricting its movements and preventing it from breathing normally. Donggon's squad, who never escaped to safety, looks at this picture in amazement. A sign with a task appears in front of Ga-yeon, and the girl freezes in surprise. Jae-hyun thinks at this moment that he doesn't have to act on his own. If Ga-yeon accepts the task and goes hunting right now, the size of the catch will increase fourfold, and the girl lives up to all his expectations. The tiger, trapped by an invisible hand, can't even escape when Ga-yeon approaches him. The girl looks with hatred at the monster that just almost ate their boss. Without a second's hesitation, she draws the string of her bow and releases the arrow. The red tiger is dead. The trust of the superhumans has increased again, and now the recluse Donggon happily registers as his vassal. As soon as the guys go up to the apartment, Jae-hyun asks the healer to help the wounded Anju. Frowning with tension, Da-jon carefully heals the victim's wounds. Little by little, the bear girl begins to come to her senses. Jae-hyun is glad that he was so lucky to meet a healer. Now he would really like to know where the other red tiger came from. Dong-gun thinks that Ben-ho's grandmother's house was in the territory of the red tigers, which is why there were so many of them there. They managed to kill one, but it turned out that there were more there. If you think about it, there wasn't a single goblin near the house. And if even these creatures were hiding from the tigers, then the grandmother herself was in great danger. Fortunately, the squad entered the territory of only 2 tigers. It was lucky that there weren't several times more of them there, otherwise they would have been doomed. By the end of the conversation, the healer is just finishing her work. "Can I go home now?" she asks as soon as the healing is over. Hyun-jun intervenes in the conversation, a little sheepishly asking if Jae-hyun is going to continue holding meetings at his house. Now is not the best time for such a conversation, but this issue worries him very much. The recluse is silent for a few seconds, looking closely at the nervous Mr. Choi. This awkward situation embarrasses absolutely everyone in this room except him. In the end, Jae-hyun suggests that the squad move into apartment number 2901, since it is empty. The guy then turns to Kim Da-bin. There are 2 more empty apartments on the 21st floor, and he suggests that the other survivors shower and do their other needs there, while he makes sure there is electricity. The girl and her brother nod shyly, promising to pass this order on to everyone else. Seeing their sad faces, Jae-hyun allows them to live in one of these apartments and leaves the other one available for everyone else. In return, he will have a small favor to ask of them. He would very much like for these 2 to continue to act as messengers between himself and the other surviving people. Da-bin is surprised by such a request, but agrees to anything for the sake of her own home. Jae-hyun asks her to tell the others that whoever kills 100 goblins first will get their own home, where there will be unlimited electricity, water, gas, and even food. If there are 10 survivors from each generation, then they will all receive equal treatment. However, how long it takes will depend on the floor they are on. From now on, Jae-hyun begins to pay fairly only those who prove their worth. The recluse creates a new task, and very soon the surviving residents begin to try to complete it. A whole crowd of goblins growling furiously are trying to catch up with one single boy. The guy curses loudly, running away from the enraged monsters as fast as he can. He only had a short distance left to run to a safe place. One of the goblins manages to grab the boy by the shoulder and pull him towards himself. Unable to stay on his feet, the guy falls and hits the floor painfully. Right now, he suddenly screams at the top of his lungs. After his shout, several guys armed with spears appear from behind the doors. With unprecedented enthusiasm, they pounce on the crowd of goblins, killing one after another. There really are a lot of monsters this time, but still, even with such a crowd of monsters, they are able to deal with them. The guys work tirelessly with their spears, piercing the angrily screaming creatures right through. Very soon, only a few wounded goblins remain from the entire crowd. Realizing that they cannot cope, the monsters begin to scatter in different directions. "Show you something interesting?" One of the guys suddenly asks the others. He adjusts his grip on the spear and stands still, focused, taking aim. With a loud cry, the boy throws the weapon forward, and it flies past his stunned friends like a bright arrow. Despite the fact that the goblins had already managed to run quite far, the spear still caught up with one of them. The blow hits the monster right in the chest, and the spear pierces it right through. "Did you see it?" the guy asks proudly. During today's hunt, these 2 killed almost 50 goblins. If you add the guy's own results to this number, then the total is already more than 100. Sun Yap-hyun, there were at least 15 of these goblins. The guy who served as bait shouts angrily. Nobody can figure out what he doesn't like this time. It doesn't matter how many creatures he brought in at once, because the results are more than good, and very soon they will all have a new home. "I almost died because of you." The boy continues to be indignant despite all the arguments. These loud cries cause Ep-henna has a headache. Angry, he reminds that the boy himself came up with the idea of hunting this way. He was confident that he would be able to escape quickly, so he suggested it. Yep, Hyun suggests that the boy leave the team if he is not satisfied with something. The other guys immediately rush to calm him down, convincing him that Seung-min also showed himself well today and ran as fast as none of them could. Yap-hyun doesn't argue with his achievements, but he can't stand the fact that the guy so brazenly attacked him and demands an apology. Terrified at the prospect of being kicked out of the team, Seung-min looks down guiltily and apologizes. At this point, the conflict is resolved, and the squad is about to go up to the 21st floor to get their new home. However, there they are faced with a huge disappointment in the form of Da-bin. The girl awkwardly apologizes and says that there is already a team that won the main prize before them. Ephyun can't believe that there was a team that killed 100 of the creatures faster than them. So the guy decides it's a stupid joke. But to his great disappointment, Dabin wasn't joking at all. And it is at this very moment that the very team that completed the task first arrives. Yaphyun can't believe his eyes when he sees what kind of team this is. It consists of Dabin's brother and 2 other older people. Minho says that they already went and looked at the new house, but they didn't like it, so they refused it. But in exchange, the gentleman will install electricity and water in his and Jiho's apartments. In addition, Jae-hyun will free Jiho's daughters from completing missions. Dabin thought that the daughters of this couple were still just children, but she was wrong, and the girls have long been adults. It's just that their faces look rather childish and cute. The older couple is too worried about them, even though the girls are probably better with a bow and arrow than they are. Even after winning the competition, Minho and the duo will continue to hunt goblins in the area at Mr. Jae's request. Henna. At this point, Yong-hyun finally recovers from the shock. The guy shouts loudly that this is all unfair and that Minho and the others are interested parties. Only now remembering about Yeon-hoon's team, Brother Dabin says that the master asked to send this team to the 30th floor and give them the same prizes as the teams in 2nd and 3rd place. Dabin is glad that everything was resolved this way and no one will be left offended. She suggests that Yeon-hyun and his squad actually go up to the 30th floor, because they are already expected there. The team finally agrees and they head upstairs, a little nervous about the upcoming meeting with the gentleman everyone speaks of with such admiration and respect. Is he some kind of god? Probably just a cult leader. The rest of the squad starts to mock the unknown gentleman. Sun Min interrupts them, because it should be obvious that it is not right to speak like that about a person with such abilities on his own territory. Aren't you the one who's going to meet him now? He says tensely to the guys. Yep, Hyun turns towards him with displeasure. Puppy! The boy swears. Finally, the elevator they were riding on rises to the desired floor. Jae-hyun immediately approaches them, and his figure exudes such a powerful force that Ep's squad involuntarily Henna goes quiet. The recluse smiles politely at the newcomers and states his name. Yep, Hyun and everyone else freeze at first, looking hesitantly at the gentleman they have heard so much about. But in the end, Hyun takes a step forward and extends his hand to introduce himself. Jae-hyun said that he had a lot of fun watching how their team performed, especially enjoying the use of barricades. Yep. Hyun looks at his master with fear, at a loss as to how he was able to know such precise details of their battles. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun says that he will immediately start connecting electricity, water, and gas to 2 apartments nearby. Yep. Hyun still can't believe it. Jae-hyun says he's doing this because they passed the selection by killing 100 goblins. And I'm not a cult leader, the recluse continues, smiling cheerfully. He watches with grim satisfaction as the faces of the boys in this squad stretch out in shock and shame. Their flushed cheeks and guiltily lowered eyes completely satisfy the recluse. Now he has one small request for these guys. Now they themselves, all together, and not just Sun Min, will serve as bait for the goblins. Dongon's squad could really use some help like this. Throw it! Yep, Hyun shouts at the top of his lungs, leading the goblins to the right place. Donggun smiles in anticipation. He activated a new ability and now he can't wait to try it out. This is a B-rank ability that allows you to throw objects using your mind, increasing your attack power by exactly 5 times. When physical strength is expended during the throw, sword energy temporarily appears at the tip of the spear. Donggon has the title of Knight, which allows him to receive triple experience and money for killing monsters. So now the guy stands calmly, waiting for the nearest goblin to run closer. As soon as the monster reaches him and swings its huge clawed palm, he activates the skill. Using the power of his mind, Donggon throws the spear without using his hands at all. The weapon, quite small in comparison to the monster, is thrust straight into the goblin's forehead. Gayon, behind Donggun's back, keeps up with his boss, tirelessly killing goblins in the same manner. The goblin who was hit right in the forehead by the spear falls as a huge dead carcass at Donggon's feet, and the guy takes out his weapon again. The next spear, this time thrown by hand, also hits the target accurately. The last monster has been killed and now the task of destroying 100 goblins is complete. When the monsters were dealt with, a whole and unharmed family of 3 was discovered nearby. Donggun and the rest of the guys take these people with them to bring them to Jae-hyun. Therefore, the recluse very soon receives another notification about the discovery of creatures that meet the requirements for citizenship. Along with these 3, Jae-hyun already has 200 citizens. After granting citizenship to Im Dong-woo, Song Sae-byul, and Im Hyun-sung, The tax collection skill was unlocked. This skill collects 10% of the money from all citizens, and at the same time the amount of cash people have does not decrease. The recharge time is 30 days, so Jae-hyun will have to wait quite a long time before he can raise the amount needed to save his parents. He needs to send Ha Dong-gun's team to the Nambuman area as quickly as possible. So the recluse decides to distribute the finances and unexpectedly increases his own level to 10. The surprised guy receives a grant of 1 billion won, and the construction function is immediately activated. Now he becomes an absolute recluse of this entire apartment building. The amazed guy begins to look at the list of objects for construction provided by the system. The information unpleasantly surprises him because it turns out that, for example, in order for the construction of solar panels to pay for itself, one will have to wait about 5 years. Therefore, the first thing the recluse decides to do is to raise Dong-gun's level. And then he remembers the grant he recently received for 1 billion won. The guy learns that this money can only be spent on construction, and this amount does not include the money in his account. Jae-hyun decides that he can't help but spend it all. That's why he's determined to install solar panels. A new store window appears in the system, and the recluse decides to see what it is. This is a room that works in combination with the Absolute Recluse skill, where you can sell absolutely all registered items. It is a system that creates objects in reality the moment a person pays for a purchase through a translucent window. All this time, the production of humanitarian aid and its delivery will also work. And with such a store, citizens will be able to buy everything they need themselves, and Jae-hyun himself will be able to install some things. In this case, the recluse decides to increase the amount of payments for everyone. The system asks where the store should be installed, and Jae-hyun chooses number 101. Then the guy decides to install a gym as well. There, citizens will be able to increase their strength and endurance. Training in this place will be 200% more effective. A notification appears about the addition of a product listing feature, and the guy decides to immediately see what it is. He clicks on the water tab and a whole list opens. The surprised guy quickly runs his eyes over the list of different types of water and remains quite satisfied. This greatly increases the choice. He decides to look at the rest of the goods and is also completely delighted. Meanwhile, Dong-gun's squad is hunting goblins again. Doksu actively wields the halberd, enjoying his new skill. The guy finishes with the goblins pretty quickly and wipes the sweat from his forehead tiredly. Dong-gun suddenly asks, "What will happen to the weapon if you just pick it up and throw it away?" He asks the guy to give him the halberd for a while, and he doesn't have time to object. Dong-gun carefully picks up the weapon, which still has a bright blue glow emanating from it. He takes a good swing before throwing the halberd forward. Behind him, Doksu clutches his head when he sees his weapon being handled like that. "What should I do now?" he shouts at his boss in panic, to which Dong-gun asks him to try to summon the halberd back. Doksu's mouth drops open in amazement at such a wonderful idea. He reaches forward and tries to call the weapon back. To his great shock and surprise, the halberd actually appears in his hand in an instant. "Dong-gun, are you a genius?" Doksu shouts enthusiastically. Ga-yeon runs up to the guys and shouts that they need to leave here immediately. The girl ran out of arrows and is now practically defenseless. Suddenly, a new set materializes right in front of her. A delighted Ga-yeon picks up the set of arrows and immediately begins to use them. Now their mission is complete. Jae-hyun learns that he can increase his own abilities with rewards from completed missions. Now he has at least some hope. It's about 10 kilometers from here to his parents' house. You can get there on foot in about 3 hours. The guy climbs onto the roof and sadly looks at what the once beautiful city has turned into. Now before his eyes there are only ruins. Jae-hyun understands that he needs to hurry, otherwise his parents may not wait for him. Should I start with Dong-gun's team? The guy thinks and decides to scroll through the information about all the squad members again. Kim-gon is level 22 with the awakened ability Crow's Mission. He is Ju with her second form in the form of a bear, and Da-jung, a talented healer. However, unlike Da-jung, who has already been registered as a vassal, Anju still lacks loyalty. Of course, people with awakened abilities are initially more effective. But for now, there is no other way other than resurrecting the child to make Anju his vassal. Therefore, first you need to raise the difficulty level of the task. Jae-hyun is trying to create a quest to kill a monster above level 40, because surely the reward for such a monster will be greater. But he also does not have enough resources to create such a task. The recluse suspected that this was impossible, but he could not help but try. A new notification about the destruction of an orc arrives, and this gives him an interesting thought. Jae-hyun decides to create a group quest, and this time he succeeds in setting a reward in the form of resurrecting a child. Now he needs to make sure that Anju is really on his side. So the guy goes back to the 30th floor. Ju immediately attacks him. The girl was in such a hurry that she ran with all her might, and now she can't catch her breath properly. She has already seen the reward for this task, and tears of sincere gratitude are flowing from the girl's eyes. Jaehyun hopes that they will be able to complete this task even despite the time limit. In a fit of emotion, Onju falls straight to the floor again, still sobbing. "Thank you," she whispers quietly. More than anything in the world, she wants to spend at least one more day with her son. Now, Onju's loyalty has increased significantly, and Jaehyun can register her as a vassal. The guy goes into one of the apartments promised to the teams and starts preparing it for living. All it takes is a little effort for electricity and hot water to appear. The guy is already used to the fact that all these actions are easy and simple. Because of this, Jaehyun sometimes even feels like some kind of great wizard. He then asks the system to calculate the store's sales for the day and finds out that more than 300,000 won have been credited to his account today. The guy once again uses his absolute eyes to see what is happening in the store right now. And what he sees there, he really doesn't like. Jaehyun didn't think that the payments would spoil his mood so much. Conflicts are increasingly breaking out among residents. Once a space called the store was created on the first floor of the house, everything changed dramatically. The pennies that were awarded for killing goblins began to stimulate the desire to hunt. Now citizens have to go outside their homes to kill at least a few goblins and get a reward. Now the level increase is going according to plan, and the number of new citizens has increased significantly. Surely in the future the figures will grow exponentially. Jaehyun shifts his observation to Onju. Full of enthusiasm, the girl does not spare herself at all, tearing apart one goblin after another. The news of the possibility of her son's return gave her a tremendous amount of strength. Now Ju will do everything in her power to complete the task given to her group. Having finished with the monsters, the girl smoothly flows into human form. The fur on her body is rapidly disappearing and her body is changing shape. When the transformation is complete, she exhales tiredly. The rest of the squad members are worried about her well-being, but the girl convinces them that everything is fine. She has her own reasons for trying so hard. Without sparing herself, Jaehyun knew he did the right thing by bringing Onju and Da-young together, and now he sees that they get along quite well. It was an obvious outcome, judging by their characteristics. Meanwhile, the girls notice something more terrible than an ordinary goblin approaching. They peered intently into the darkness, from which they heard someone's heavy, threatening growl. Another monster approaches them with slow, confident steps. But this time, it won't be easy for anyone. The girls look tensely at the creature, from which comes a heavy, oppressive aura of danger. He's not like the monsters they've encountered before. Onjun is the one who comes to his senses the fastest and once again switches into his fighting form. A moment later, a huge brown bear is already standing in front of the monster. Without wasting any time, Onjun immediately rushes into attack. The monster manages to put his weapon forward to avoid this blow. The bear tries to break through the huge long spear, but the monster does not allow her to do so. Ga-yeon joins the fight and draws his bow, preparing to use his new skill as well. She releases an arrow and it flies towards the monster, whistling through the air. The girl is confident in the success of her shot, because last time with the help of this skill she managed to kill several huge goblins at once. However, today she is in for a big disappointment. The monster easily deflects the arrow fired at him with his spear, but the she-bear takes advantage of this delay and, with a growl, rushes straight at him again.